Welcome back. In Texas, we're known for a lot of things. For one, the rest of the country knows we love guns and gun rights, and of course, hunting and fishing. So wouldn't you like your right to hunt and fish be written into law? Joining me now is State Representative for the 81st District of Texas, Brooks Landgraf. Brooks, so great to see you.
Macey, it's good to see you, and always good to be here.
Great. So Brooks, you've been very active ever since taking office, and your latest move actually has something to do with something you're very passionate about. Can you tell us about that?
Well, sure. As a lifelong hunter and a proud defender of the Second Amendment, some of my colleagues in the House of Representatives and I have authored a bill that would give Texans a constitutional right to hunt and fish.
So currently, is there any mention of hunting and fishing rights in the Texas Constitution?
Currently, the Texas Constitution doesn't have a provision that guarantees the right to hunt or fish, and that's one reason why some of my colleagues and I believe that we need that so that we can protect that right and preserve it for future generations of Texans to enjoy.
Now, are we talking about hunting and fishing rights on public or private land, or both?
Well, it technically relates to both. One issue or one key component that we have in the legislation is that regardless of what happens with this law or the constitutional amendment, it would not in any way negatively impact the rights of private property owners.
Okay. Now, if this bill were passed by the House and Senate, what changes would sportsmen notice, if any?
Well, if the House and the Senate both passed the bill, then it would actually go to voters for them to make the final determination, since it would be a constitutional amendment. But upon passage and upon being enacted into the Constitution, Texas hunters and fishermen wouldn't see any changes. Sportsmen would still be able to enjoy rights the way that they do now. It would just receive further and additional protection under the Texas Constitution.
Now, critics always ask the question, how does killing animals help wildlife conservation?
Mm-hmm. Well, hunting has always been integral to the conservation of wildlife. When you think about it, wildlife conservation has a lot to do with population control, and that's what hunting is. And of course, in Texas and all other states, hunting is regulated by season, and we have wildlife experts that understand how to balance the ecosystems. So even with a constitutional amendment in place, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department would still regulate hunting, and it would still have conservation as one of its goals.
So if it hasn't been put into law before, why now?
Well, I think so many Texans want this. As someone who grew up spending time with my family and friends, learning a lot from my father, for example, while we were hunting, it's part of our pastime, and I think as Texans, it's part of our heritage. There are certain attacks on the practice in other parts of the country, but I think by putting this constitutional amendment into place now, it sends a message to the rest of the country that in Texas, we protect and support the right to hunt and fish, and we support wildlife conservation through hunting and fishing, and we promote the relationships and the good experiences that can be had outdoors through this.
All right. Well, Brooks, what else are you working on down there in Austin that we should know about?
Well, we're about a month and a half into the 140-day legislative session. Things have been very busy so far. I feel like we're off to a very good start. One thing that I'm working very diligently on is, as a new member of the Energy Resources Committee, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that we still have a robust oil and gas industry here in the Permian Basin and in West Texas. We also have some other measures that we're working on to keep Texas open for business. For example, cutting the franchisor margins tax, with those costs being passed on to consumers. But we're doing everything that we can to make sure that Texas is a great place to live, a great place to work, and a great place to raise a family.
And hunt and fish.
And hunt and fish, that's right.
Well, Brooks, anything else that you want to tell us about before we go? We have just a few more minutes.
Well, if there's, as I was mentioning before, with 140 days in the session, we have quite a bit on our plate as it relates to higher education, as it relates to transportation and securing our water future. We also have some issues with education that we're addressing, most notably a way to support teachers through their pension benefits, to make sure that we still have strong schools and create an environment in Texas that makes sure that we have schools where students want to learn and teachers want to teach.
Well, Brooks, it sounds like you definitely have your plate full, but we appreciate you taking time to come visit us today.
Well, it's an honor to serve, and it's an honor to be here with you. Thanks, Macy.
Brooks. That's all for today's Closer Look. Stay tuned for the CBS 7 News at 5.